You know, I started making videos for YouTube for a pretty simple reason. That was mostly just to learn how to do it and ramble about the games I've been playing. Sure, there's been a few times where some ideas have just been lost to my lack of time. I do really envy people that get to do this stuff for a living. You know, even if I do often wonder if the average modern game journalist even plays video games at all. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Kotaku.
What is that?
Working a sometimes more than full-time job only allows me to do so much time to actually play games, let alone make videos about them. Which I guess is a way of saying that if I make a video about something, it's because I really felt compelled to talk about it. Sometimes ideas get put to the indefinite back burner, like I really wanted to talk about the System Shock remake or a more obscure but charming title like My Friendly Neighborhood. Maybe I'll get around to them eventually. With everything in gaming, especially first-person shooters, seemingly revolving around online matchmaking, battle passes, and chasing cool skins, it can be really easy to forget that proper single-player experiences actually still exist in this space. I guess that's mainly because these games are increasingly coming to us from indie developers, which is completely fine because I often find that indie games can be much more compelling or unhindered by corporate expectations than their AAA counterpart. Sure, indie games don't always have the polish of a big studio game, but these games often lose any character they potentially had to the bloated creative processes of those big companies. A good recent example of this, in my opinion, was Deathloop. It was a fine game at the end of the day with excellent polished visuals and a cool style, but you know, that was just window dressing for a soulless, empty story that I forgot about, probably about 5 minutes after the credits rolled. This one admittedly kind of came out of nowhere for me. I barely remember it from last year's Realms Deep show because, well, the single day 4-hour show is actually a really terrible idea. I don't really understand the thought process behind a lot of decisions at 3D Realms these days, but that's a story for another time. So then Steam Next Fest rolled around and, well, it must have been the stars aligning that because of a really poor showing for FPS games this time around that I ended up giving the demo for this a go. Bears in Space is an indie game through and through, with the core development team consisting of only 3 people. As they state from the first time you load up the game, it's essentially been a passion project they've been working on for around 7 years. Which, well, gives off please take it easy on our game vibes, but in reality is actually incredibly impressive considering the end product here. So, you play as Maxwell Adams, a soon-to-be retiring space captain piloting a prison ship for bears. Soon you'll find yourself under attack from the Bearmada Alliance, and in your bid to escape, you use an experimental warp drive which has the unintended effect of merging your DNA with one of the bears on the ship, Beartana. You following along?
Oh, look at that big building, Max. I reckon our way off this rock is gonna be that away.
Beartana now essentially lives inside your head like a sassy Johnny Silverhand. Or maybe you live in Beartana's head? I never really truly figured out the dynamic here, and I'm not really sure how much that matters. Essentially, Beartana's DNA gives you much more strength and agility, and everyone seems to refer to you as Man-Bear. You then crash land on a planet that is inhabited by a ruling race of robots, which become your primary enemies as you begin your adventure to try and find a way back to Earth. As for where the plot goes from here, well, it's a trip. At some points it doesn't even really seem to have any rhyme or reason, but sends you along a new adventure or fetch quest because, well, it can. There's a whole host of side quests here which do reward you with some in-game currency for completing them. However, I recommend taking these ones in just because most of them are actually really fun or hilarious.
I'm Steve Zero, and this is Industrial Fan Swan Dive.
The writing here is sharp and the humor is concise. I know the vibe of this game might lead a lot of people to draw comparisons to 2022's High on Life, which was a game from Justin Roiland, the man behind Rick and Morty. And you know what? That's fair enough. But the writing in that game was often completely insufferable, and well, Bears in Space is nothing like that. The weapon set here is your standard FPS tropes with a pistol, shotgun, machine gun, pew-pew energy gun, and of course a rocket launcher. I mean, these weapons have been our workhorses for like 30 years now, so why change a good thing? The movement is quick with a dash mechanic and also a grapple mechanic that shows up in specific areas. The animations are all really smooth and attacks are crisp. Mechanically, there's really nothing to complain about at all here. The FPS game FPSs really well. Enemy design is really unique, and all the enemies will have a specific purpose in combat arenas without much in the way of redundancy. You will quickly get into a groove and start dealing with certain enemies first in any situation to minimize the threat, all the while weapon swapping to deal with each enemy in the most appropriate way. The game really knows how to get you into that fun zone. Also, if it wasn't apparent from the footage here, the enemy projectiles in the game are in the style of a bullet hell game. It's pretty rare to see this type of thing in an FPS game, so I don't want to feel like I'm glossing over it. It's really cool. Beyond the workhorse weapons in your arsenal, which you can actually grind XP on and level up, there are a seemingly endless procession of novelty weapons. I will say that in a lot of ways, these novelty guns feel like they were put in the game, just for fun, and well, that's totally fine. I kind of just wish they were a bit stronger, considering the massive prices you have to pay for some of them. It was also kind of disappointing not getting to try them all, because I ultimately didn't have enough money at the end of the game to unlock them all. It's not really that big of a deal though, because they're all just kind of goofy. There's one that shoots basketballs, a slingshot that shoots anvils, a bag full of rubber ducks, and one that is this game's version of the noisy cricket from Men in Black. Which brings us to the pop culture references, which could be like an hour-long video by itself. There's tons of references to The Simpsons, Seinfeld, Fast and Furious, Jackass, you name it. And of course, with all the base level robots being almost directly copied from the original Lost in Space robot. Bears in Space is a lovingly crafted little indie shooter. Besides all the goofy novelty weapons, it doesn't try to do too much, and what it sets out to do, it does well. These days, a lot of focus is put on, hyper-realistic shooters, survival horror settings, or dingy sci-fi dystopias, such to the point that sometimes I forget that first-person shooters are allowed to be goofy and funny too. I thought the story and the humor with Bears in Space was really charming, and while even if I thought the third episode might have dragged on a bit more than it needed to, I really loved every minute of the game. Nothing ever felt like a chore. Like, I've been playing games like CS for decades, and I've had a crippling addiction to Tarkov for the last couple of months, so it was just really pleasant to have a game like this remind me that, sometimes it's okay to just have fun. Thanks for watching.